People who grew up in the 1970s carry a way of thinking that doesn't fully match the world today, and most of the time, they don't even notice it themselves. It's not something obvious like values or opinions. It shows up in how they handle simple, everyday moments in ways that feel slightly out of sync with everything around them. Take something as basic as boredom. For someone growing up today, boredom is almost a problem that needs to be fixed immediately. There's always something to check, something to watch, something to scroll. But in the 1970s, boredom wasn't something you escaped from quickly. It was something you sat inside of. Entire afternoons could pass with nothing planned, nothing scheduled, and no one stepping in to entertain you. At first, that kind of emptiness feels uncomfortable, but when there's no easy way out of it, your brain adapts. It starts generating its own stimulation. Kids built things, made up games, wandered outside, or just sat there thinking. Over time, this created a very specific ability, the ability to function without constant input. That's why, even today, people from that era don't react to silence the same way. It doesn't feel like something is missing, it just feels normal. Now look at something else: freedom. Growing up in the 70s meant you were outside most of the day, and no one was tracking you. There were no phones, no location sharing, no constant check-ins. You left the house with a loose instruction: be back before it gets dark, and everything in between was up to you. You decided where to go, who to trust, and what risks to take. And those risks were real. You climbed things you probably shouldn't have climbed. You got into situations you didn't fully understand. Sometimes you got hurt, but nothing stepped in to correct your decisions instantly. You learned by experiencing the consequences directly. That kind of environment builds a very different internal response to problems. Instead of looking outward for immediate help, the first instinct becomes internal. You pause, you assess, and somewhere in the background there's a quiet assumption: I'll figure it out. Not because you were told to think that way, but because growing up you didn't have many other options. There's also something important about how attention worked back then. People from the 70s didn't grow up being constantly seen. There was no audience reacting to everything they did, no instant feedback shaping how they acted moment to moment. You could go hours, even days, without anyone paying close attention to what you were doing, and that was completely normal. So your sense of self formed in a quieter space. It wasn't built on constant validation or correction. It developed more privately, without being adjusted in real time based on how others responded. And that leaves a mark. Even later in life, they don't feel the same need to constantly check how they're being perceived. Their behavior isn't shifting every few seconds based on external reactions. When you put all of this together, a pattern starts to emerge.
People who grew up in the 1970s tend to be more comfortable with unstructured time, more used to handling things internally, and less dependent on continuous attention from others. Not in an extreme way, and not as a rule, but consistently enough that you can notice it if you look closely. Now place that into today's environment, a world that moves faster, demands quicker responses, and constantly pulls for attention. A world where silence is rare, boredom is avoided, and almost everything is immediate. That's where the difference becomes more visible. It's in the timing of their reactions, the way they don't rush to respond to everything, the way they can sit in a moment without trying to fill it, the way they don't feel the same pressure to constantly stay connected or visible. And none of it feels like a conscious choice. It feels more like something that was set early on, in a completely different kind of environment, and never fully rewired. Not better, not worse, just built under different conditions, and those conditions shaped not just what they experienced, but how they experience everything that came after.